So it's like 11, 12, which means that I have about 40 minutes, 48 minutes to get this video out, which is definitely not happening, but I am determined to absolutely get it done before I go to bed. Because who says that 12 o'clock has to be the start of the new day? I mean, what does it matter? Anyway, this week's theme was silence. And so I decided to go for like a library where you had to run around and knock objects over. And then there would be also like a librarian that would be like alert. And whenever you made a sound, she would come over. And eventually, if you made too much noise, you would end up getting caught and kicked out of the library. And I mean, I didn't get quite that far, but I got something that was functional, which is nice, especially coming into this for like the first week again. It's been, I think, a solid year since I've properly done any sort of self-led work in Unity. So it was really nice to just come in and be refreshed again, get a feel for it again. I did like a coding course, so that was really nice to kind of put that to use a little bit, although my scripts are an absolute mess. So let's not pretend like I've implemented good architecture and stuff in this. But yeah, I decided to go for 3D, which I've done like a 12-week stint of Game a Week before this, but I always used to do 2D illustrated stuff, and I do my own assets and everything for that sort of thing. But holy heck, 3D is a whole different ball game, and especially when you're trying to make something look kind of half decent. I mean, I don't think this game is particularly great. I'm like missing a lot of textures. There's a lot of stuff that's a bit mismatched. I really don't like the wall textures that I end up going with. I mean, like overall, especially since, I haven't come into Unity for a while properly, and especially since I haven't done a game a week in 3D before, at least one that isn't sort of abstract, that is like tangible things. I'm pretty happy with this. I did a lot of model hunting online, and so like the only thing that I modeled myself were like the room and kind of the big bulky bits of furniture, and that I kind of did as quickly as possible. I started with the UI. So this is basically what I started with. The UI is like probably what I'm most comfortable with, especially just working with 2D elements, kind of having like nice juicy animations and things. I just kind of wanted to focus on something that would be juicy. Kind of wanted these like big punchy things so that like when you knock something over and you gain some score, that like it would essentially just be like juicy elements, have a good amount of feel to it. I basically designed the alert meter from the get-go. Like I had a rough idea of what I was going for. It essentially works that like if you get really alert, it takes a lot longer to cool off than if not. So when it's in the green area, it cools off really, really quickly. And then when it's in this like bigger area, when it's super close to getting alert, it takes a really long time to cool off. I thought that could lead to some like interesting playstyles. It might be a little bit long for the minute that I've given the game, but I think, especially with the sort of score bonuses that I implemented in the end, I don't think it's a bad way to go. The next thing I did was basically started looking at the library, and so I ended up getting this reference image online of like a library floor plan, and basically it's designed entirely off that. I made some like alterations. Specifically, I just cut off the bathrooms here. I didn't end up putting these tables in, even though I kind of wanted to. Missing a bit of stuff here. But for the most part, it's very, very much the same. I did like a book return here instead of having, I don't know, whatever this was. Yeah, so after that, I basically went into Blender, modeled up this room, and then kind of got it in here. I tried to get it as quickly as possible. The next thing I basically got in were these bookcases. These are 3D models that I downloaded, except on the inside they had kind of a pre-assembled set of books. And I think one of the mistakes that I made was going in and individually putting new books in because it doesn't make any sense. I thought it'd be super tactile to have all of these books be able to come out. I thought that if you hit the bookcase, it'd be cool if books went flying everywhere. I felt like that would add a good bit of game feel, but it also absolutely destroys any computer. I mean, I do feel like it looks kind of cool if you're like, like it does look kind of juicy. The only thing is the player interactions don't lend itself very well to the bookcase, because what ends up happening most of the time is the books just fall over like this, which means that they don't go anywhere. And then you have this bookcase like that's had this sort of thing happen, but typically what will happen, it'll kind of go straight down, and before like it has a chance to pop out, it'll be basically lying flat on top of the books. So I think that would be definitely something that I should have probably considered a bit better going into it. I mean, it didn't take super long. It was maybe like an hour just to pop all the books in. But I did have a whole bunch of issues with keeping these as prefabs. I tried recopying them in because I wanted to get their height exactly right so that they didn't have to move around at the start when you loaded in the scene. But I should have just waited with that until the very end before doing that. I think one of the things I should have definitely done is got a tool to help with placing things. What's going on at the moment is that like I had to go in by hand and pop it on the Z-axis. I kind of wanted everything to remain as still as possible when reloading the level. I don't know if that actually like affects performance. I think it would. I would imagine like a whole bunch of objects moving downwards at the same time, even if it's just a fraction, would have a toll. And I imagine that's probably what's happening right at the start when the scene gets loaded anyway. But just trying to minimize that as much as possible to keep it somewhat performant. I mean, this is really not optimized to be run appropriately. I mean, I did have like a week to do it, so that wasn't a concern, especially since I got a beefy enough computer to run and work with what I needed to. Yeah, I kind of went in, modeled a few of these bigger structures because I couldn't find anything online that I kind of liked. I wanted to go for like a really big feel with this oak table, but it looks awful because it's 4 polygons. Did like a basic counter, and then got these little trolleys in that are supposed to be like little book carts. They were the only like free model I could find. I think the one thing that really gave the space a lot of life was adding in the windows. It feels really like cramped without it. So I'm really glad that like I managed to get those in because that was a very end of the line kind of thing. As far as like, I actually managed to keep my asset folder pretty clean, which I'm pretty happy about. It gets a bit messier as soon as you start going in deeper. I think the librarian was such a joke coming into it. Her animations are just ridiculous. I used Mixamo for the character and the animations, because I don't have time to model my own character and put my own animations in. So like I just put a basic walking animation in from that. But I do love her running animation is just absurd. I saw it and I was like, this is hilarious. It is such a joke. I don't know. In some sense, it does kind of take away from the aesthetic of the game, but it was too funny not to put it in. And it was at that point where I'm kind of just like, I don't care anymore. Like, I need to get this done and it needs to happen. I just ended up using a first-person controller from the asset store. It's not super great. It does have a few issues with like registering jumping. So you can see that it's got like the debug for when it hits the floor. If it's not on the floor, it doesn't draw the line. But the problem starts to happen when you like jump on objects like this. Because it's a capture, when you end up jumping on like edges like this, you don't get that response again until you're just like the very center of your body is on the jump. But I mean, free asset, super functional, very happy with it. Just not appropriate, I guess, for the use case that I'm running it. And I mean, it still works fine. It's just, it makes the jumping a little bit awkward and it makes it kind of feel like you stick to things, which is a vibe maybe, but it's definitely not like an intentional design. And that's, if this was something that I'd work on, it's definitely something that I'd fix. As far as the scripting goes, it's pretty basic. I've only got 13 scripts, so super simple. I definitely probably went a little big with their functionality, but I was just get it done sort of vibe. I'm doing everything from messy calls. I've got one reference section that's super messy to get to. So the way it works is it will like have a specified amount that it has to rotate within every frame in order to register that it's falling. I don't think I'd want to keep this as like the way that it would handle it, but it was just the first way that I thought of doing it. So all of the objects are measured on the x-axis, which is a bit messy because you're working with quaternions. So it's not always going to register in the way that you think it will. But I found that the results I was getting from this were a bit nicer than doing it with every single axis, because it just kind of meant that more often than not, if you were just like nudging a chair, you were getting a response. Whereas now, like, you have to actually kind of knock it over for it to register. It will then go to a state where it's registered that it is currently falling. And then once it lands on something and once it stops rotating the amount that you want it to rotate, once it falls below that, it will then register the fall and send all the information to the static score reference. Also got a nice little debug message, just make sure that everything's working out nicely. I had some issues with the score, which was really annoying, but I just wasn't resetting the score amount properly. Built this really nice event class and then never used it, not once. So yeah, I'm not super comfortable using events and things yet, but I like went into this, I was like, oh, I'm going to structure it so appropriately. It's going to be really nicely written, something that I'd be happy to show people. But no, it's didn't even realize that I had it again until I looked today. The time's basically handled by the stopwatch object that you see in the scene, which is definitely messy. Yeah, so it's all like handled by this little dude here. But yeah, like I just did it like this because I didn't have to bother putting another script on, and just managed to get the watch arm to animate from here. It's just simple stuff, rotating around. Just made sure that the anchor point was where it needed to be. Doing super messy kind of references to the possible outcomes in the game over scene. This is probably the messiest script. I did this basically today as I was trying to finish everything off. Got a bunch of different badges for the different outcomes. So if you're not detected, you get a 10 times score multiplier. If you leave, you get 2,000 points. If you're caught, your score gets halved. And then also just making sure that we register the high score whenever it's at its highest. So really, really messy. I've got a string here, which references the reason. And this gets called by other scripts, which I don't like. But you can see here, it's just like if it contains these characters, the letters caught, then it will set the caught badge active. It's, yeah, very clunky. I've just got like a toggle script where I was like, everything that needs to get turned off, just chuck it into an array and get it to swap over. So things that need to get turned off get thrown in here, things that need to get turned on get thrown in here, and then when this gets disabled, although this doesn't really matter, it doesn't happen, those objects, the inverse happens again. And then I just have to make sure that whenever I reload the scene, that all the static references get reset, because those carry over when you reset the screen. Also just got a nice little button for the full screen, because I don't know what happened to the like old little Unity thing that popped up when you used to run games. Score Manager, it's just, this is kind of handling the animations as well. I'm not super comfortable using the animator and I feel pretty okay coding. So like, I kind of like the control that I have of just handling all of my animations in script. I just do think it gets a little bit messy when you're handling like timers and things. And I know that I could use coroutines, but I don't know enough about like the garbage collection related to that to feel comfortable. I think as far as like a script goes, it's not very feature creepy. It works really well. I definitely had some fun scripts where it was just like, I can't be bothered copying all of these bookcases, so I'm just gonna write a script that will do it for me. This one didn't end up working because as soon as you instantiate a prefab during runtime, it doesn't keep a reference to the prefab. So this was useless in the end anyway. Librarian's basically just a nav mesh. It's the first time that I've worked with Mixamo and adding animations onto a player model. It's the first time I think I've ever put like a character model in a game that's 3D. I don't usually like doing that. I mean, I'm not like a super competent 3D modeler or anything. I mean, you can see like the objects I have here. My meshes are usually not very great. Yeah, set up the librarian with a nav mesh, which was a bit of an interesting time. I mean, like, I don't use the animator a lot as it is anyway, but figuring that out was a good time. I just felt like it would look a lot better and a lot more polished than having just a capsule, which I guess is what I would usually do. I think next time I'm definitely going to move away from realistic looking objects. I've got a nice little low poly pack that I'd like to use. Maybe also go back into 2D sort of stuff again. I really like the sort of 2.5D where it's a mix. I don't know if I'm going to be so quick to jump right back into this again. Working with textures was really fun. Found a really cool artist that uploaded a whole bunch of their substance textures. I really kind of like how the wall turned out. I just don't think it's appropriate for the library, but it's just an amazing substance texture. I wanted to use this like anime angry react thing as a bit of a joke, but that didn't end up happening. Put in the tutorial kind of thing today. That's definitely very cobbled together. I've got like the room handling the instructions set, and I don't like what I've done here with the images. I should have just like put it on each of them individually and let them handle their own things, because this led to a bit of like messy code, which definitely impacts the readability. But I think the end result is kind of cool. I was going for one of those like roller advertising wall things. They're literally like the computer screen monitors just scaled up with the canvas popped on top of them. So very clunky. Added in the exit sign because this room is like a trigger and it's a state. So I kind of wanted to indicate that when you enter this room again, you basically leave the map. Obviously, that's not a clear enough indicator that results in a win state. There's a lot of hidden features that this game has. I kind of was a bit random with the scores that get assigned for objects. But basically, I think the winning strategy is to get to these printers. And to do that, you have to move one of these cushions across. I intentionally made it so that these cushions don't have any point score, because they're the sort of thing that in a library itself would get moved around and thrown around a bit. And that like, I don't think a librarian would be particularly annoyed if you like knocked one over. The monitors have really high alert levels because I figured they're quite valuable. And it's the sort of thing that if you knock that over, someone's going to take note. So basically, if you knock one of the monitors over and like anything else, it's alert for you, buddy. This is a really good spot as well to get lots of points, but that will instantly make you alert. And I kind of designed it that way because there's also like only one entry point and you have no visibility into the rest of the library. So you don't actually know whether the librarian's close. The librarian basically just follows like a bunch of waypoints that are pre-set. And then if the alert is at 1, which is where it registers angry and wanting to catch you, then they'll run after you. Yeah, you can kind of see the navigation mesh that I've got going on. And then all of the obstacles themselves are marked as navigation obstacles, so they'll try and avoid that. I could have set it up actually very easily that when an object falls over, its navigation object is deactivated. And that would mean that when the librarian is running after you, she'll happily run through objects that have already fallen over. I think that's also a really good kind of way of registering what has fallen over and what hasn't, because all of the objects fall over in a single use, like it happens once. So that was my game for the theme Silence. Next week's theme is going to be Evaluate. Hop on that if you feel like it, I guess. I mean, do it in whatever medium you want. I don't care. It'd just be cool to have like some people along for the journey. You can download this game on itch. I don't know, I kind of am vibing this weird talky thing that it is. I wasn't happy with it, and then I watched it, and now I am. I just think I need to work on actually maintaining coherent sentences and probably going into a bit more depth about like coding for people who have no idea what that is. But look, I got to get this out. It's 3 hours into Tuesday. I'm 3.5 hours behind, but we made it. We got there. And I'll see you next week.